Good morning, friends. I hope you're doing really great today. A couple weeks ago, we visited beautiful tea gardens in the state of Assam, India. The slopes and the valleys and the fields were filled with these perfectly manicured bushes containing exquisite tea leaves. The state of Assam is known for having some of the best tea in the entire world. And after we visited these tea gardens, we went to this factory where they refine and produce the tea leaves into the tea that you and I eventually get into our tea bags or loose leaf tea so that we can drink good tea on a Wednesday morning like today. And the process was incredibly long. It blew my mind how many steps they had in this factory that eventually produced the refined tea. Here, take a look at some of these video clips. So after the tea leaves are clipped from the bushes, they're brought to this giant cement bay in the factory and laid out for drying. And after a certain process of drying, they're then carried by conveyor to the first step of the pulverizing, chopping process. And the tea leaves are chopped and ground and pulverized and then ground some more and then smashed with big steel rollers and then baked in a kiln, then filtered and refined, and then they're baked again, and then ground again, chopped again, then baked again, then filtered again. And this process continues on for some 16, 17 steps until finally at the last station in the factory, the tea is refined one last time into 4 different categories. And the most refined, of course, is the most expensive, and the lesser refined probably goes to us here in America where we don't have educated taste buds to detect what is really good tea and what isn't. But this whole process of chopping, pulverizing, refining, baking reminded me and Josh and Ale of the sanctifying work of God's grace in our lives. That testing that God brings in our lives is not necessarily for punishing, but for refining. James said this in chapter 1 of his letter, verses 3 and 4. He said, "Count it all joy, or consider it a thing of joy, something to rejoice about, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter all kinds of various trials." Various means all sorts. The Greek word poiklos means all kinds and sizes and shapes of trials. Why can we count it all joy? Because knowing that the testing of your faith, he says, produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect work so that you may be complete, lacking nothing. The goal for every Christ follower is maturity in Jesus Christ. That's what God wants to develop in our lives, but that comes through testing. An incredibly arduous, long process of refining, kind of like those tea leaves. Sometimes it's going to be a fiery trial. Like in 1 Peter, he wrote, "Hey, don't be surprised when you face fiery ordeals or trials, because just as Christ suffered, we are fellowshipping with him in the same kind of suffering, knowing that God is developing in us Christ-like behavior and his attributes within us. He's glorifying himself through us when we go through the testing, if we embrace it as his work of refining, rather than resisting it or trying to escape it or thinking it's some sort of punishing. God brings testing in our lives for refining. And when we successfully endure the testing, the end result is maturity. And that's what God wants to bring into my life, into your life. And to be honest though, boy, the long, arduous test of just watching the tea be refined made me exhausted. But when I think about all the different things that God has brought my wife and I through, and what is still yet in the future, God will bring into our lives to test us, to refine us. And I pray that it produces an endurance so that the end result is that we are complete in Jesus Christ. And I want to know what you're going through today. What kind of testing are you walking through? And I want to encourage you to not resist it or try to escape it, but instead actually lean into Jesus through the testing, because knowing that through the refining process, God is making you more like Jesus Christ. That's just how God works. So today, are you facing something that makes it feel like the temperature is going up and up and up and up, and you're passing through the kiln? Or you're going through a pulverizing, refining, filtering process? I know what that feels like. and it hurts. It's not easy. But I want you to know this, something that I'm learning myself, that God taught me in the tea gardens of India, that his testing that he brings into our lives is not for punishing, but for refining. And you can trust that his goal for your life is maturity in Jesus Christ, that our lives will be molded to the image, to the character of Jesus. That's his heart for you and for me. He's not out to get you, he's out to love you and produce in and through you what you and I could never achieve on our own. Like a good cup of tea. God is working out a refining process to the praise of his glory. That is the sanctifying work of grace in our lives. So may God be with you and guide you and guard you in all that you do and say today. I love you. God bless.